Okay, we're going live right now. Hang in with us.
You're on the Six Screens Telenetwork, earning the reputation of giving all the right ingredients, uninhibited, in exposing the hard, cold facts about the Watchtower Society. Disney.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome in to another rockin' awesome Saturday night here at the Six Screens. Well, my name is Rick Farron, and we've got some good programming coming up for you tonight, exposing the Jehovah's Witnesses. Well, we have Barbara Anderson. She's coming on here with us, and she has her husband Joe with her tonight as well. And well, I'll bring Barbara on, and she can kind of give us a little overview of what's going on here tonight. Barbara, say hello to the audience, you and Joe.
Hey, everybody. Hello. Yeah, we're glad to be here.
Glad to be here.
There you go.
So, but I had to get the whip out.
Get the whip out. And so what's going on tonight, Bob? Tell the audience.
Well, we got a wonderful guy, Story, but he didn't want to appear live. Now, I can assure everybody that he's not hiding from the authorities or anybody. He has a fabulous story, but he didn't want to appear. He felt ill at ease, he said, and whatever. So he agreed that I could narrate his story. He wrote the story. So Joe agreed to help me because it's a long story. So that's the background here. So I'm going to start immediately to read. And what we've done, Joe and I, we have pages of material. And to save people from going crazy listening to me reading all this stuff, I had to have help. And plus the fact that it's more interesting to hear from somebody else too. But we could goof up because we sure have a lot of stuff here. So put up with us if we do. Okay?
So what we'll do, Barbara, is we'll read through it, and then we can stop, and I can kind of get some thoughts on it.
Yeah.
Maybe if some people, too, in the audience that's listening in on our telephone line, they might want to jump in, too, and give some thoughts. So we can kind of be free-for-all here tonight, and we can all get together like around the campfire and talk about what's going on behind the curtains of the Watchtower. So let's do that. I'll bring you guys on full speed here, and I want you to start. Give me 1 second. So you go ahead, but I'm here, Barbara. I'll be listening and I'll be jumping in as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Rick, for letting us be here to tell a fascinating story, and it's an ongoing tale that ended in 2009, or 15 years ago, for Frank Cavillon and his wife Barbara. Now, many people who are listening could know the Cavillons. I mean, they haven't been hiding under a rock. They've been active in their chosen world of, as you'll see what that world is. It's an interesting world. I wish I had been part of it, but anyway. So Barbara and Frank left the Jehovah's Witnesses religion in 2007. They were disfellowshipped in 2009 for apostasy. How did it all begin? Well, Frank's parents became witnesses in the early 1950s. That was about the same time that I became a witness. His father was Al Cavillon. He had been a successful band leader in the 1930s and 40s. He was the band leader behind the music in movies, actually, and in other type of things, but I suppose records and whatever. Dances. I mean, this was a very popular orchestra. But by the 1950s, Al struggled to support his family. Frank had 3 sisters, so there were 6 of them altogether. One day, while Frank's father was networking in Hollywood, he ran into Henry Russell, who had formerly headed up the music department at NBC, West Coast. Al asked Henry why he was no longer at NBC. Henry replied that he had found a better job. It was hard to imagine that there could be a better job than the one Henry had, so Al's curiosity moved him to inquire further. Henry's answer was, "I'm working for Jehovah." Although Frank's father had a sense of where the conversation was going, he asked, "Who is Jehovah?" Although Henry knew Al was the son of a rabbi, and so chastened him for asking such a question. At this point, Frank's father wanted to end the conversation and said, "We'll have to talk about it sometime." Well, this fella, Henry Russell, said, "Okay, when?" Outmaneuvered, Al invited Henry for dinner the following Wednesday evening, and Henry arrived at about 6 p.m. And after a marathon debate, he left at approximately 6 a.m. the next morning. These all-night sessions continued for the better part of 2 years. Based on these discussions and Al's independent research, he became convinced that what Henry was sharing was the truth. Frank's father was baptized, and close to a year later, so was Frank's mother. News that a former band leader and his wife, who had formerly been a fashion model, had become witnesses, spread in the witness community. Here's a familiar name to many who have researched the organization, and especially the entertainment world. Bonnie Boyd Heath included Frank's parents in her list of celebrity witnesses. Over the years, Frank's parents' generosity and hospitality earned them many witness friends, including a good number of the leadership, most especially Ted and Melita Jarris. Ted and Melita stayed with the Cavallins for probably a matter of 6 weeks. This was during the time that Ted was waiting for an assignment after having been dismissed around 1956 from the Australian branch. Many of us know that story. He was dismissed by someone else, Lloyd Berry, who was in Japan, who was asked to go to Australia to look into accusations made against Jarris. So Jarris was removed, and he went to California. And so Frank was a youngster then. He was a child. He remembers the Jarrises. They married. Jarris married when he arrived in California from Australia. He married a girl he knew for a number of years. So Frank said that the Jarrises were always pleasant and were always in contact with Frank's parents over the years. Frank said he didn't think he ever failed to hear from Ted when he would do temporary work at Bethel. Frank added that his experiences with the Jarrises was far different from what many of his Bethel friends described. In fact, he was surprised to hear how they negatively evaluated Ted and were shocked when he got Ted to show up for a recording session, because Ted always showed disinterest in things like that. Once again, Ted Jarris's attachment to Frank's parents came across when he said that it was like watching Al Cavallon when Frank was conducting the recording orchestra at Bethel. So at this time, the son had inherited his father's talent and was conducting the orchestra at Bethel that many of us are familiar that they had at one time. But Jairus always reminded Frank about his father, who was a close friend.
And interestingly, Frank's father served as an elder for many years and was quite visible in the witnesses community because he concluded the orchestra at the age of the district conventions in Los Angeles. He conducted them. His mother survived her husband by 23 years and was greatly loved and respected. Frank was 1 year old at the time of his dad's conversation, although the three elder sisters were required to attend the meetings. They never accepted the teachings. Frank would describe his family as closer than most, even though they became divided religiously at one time. At the age of 8, Frank was baptized. His two closest friends, both of whom were slightly younger, were baptized around the same time. He was genuinely interested in the Bible and tended to be conscientious when preparing talks for the ministry school. He was also very involved in music, both playing and composing. At age 16, he began dating Barbara, a girl in his own congregation who had begun attending meetings when the mother decided to return to the congregation after years of inactivity. They weren't scrutinized much other than the pleadings of his parents to the end relationship because they were too young to date. They were right, of course, but the forces of nature were at work. They weren't able to stay apart and dated off and on. And although Frank dated others, and so did she, he knew he would marry her someday. Frank graduated high school in 1969 during the Vietnam War. The default for most of young JW males after high school was to pioneer. College wasn't even considered in witness households. Frank's father was convinced that 75 would mark the 7,000 year of man's existence on earth. And as taught by the witnesses, the present world system would be destroyed by God. This would be followed by his establishing his kingdom on earth by 1975. Frank worked hard at pioneering, even making some converts, some of whom were still active 40 or so years later. After a few years of pioneering, Frank was still living with his parents and working in music for his father, and performed relatively mundane tasks for witness composers and producers who were established in the music business prior to becoming witnesses. By the time Frank was 22, Barbara and he wanted to get married. Since his income from music was hit and miss, and since he was still pioneering, he took up the offer, other default janitorial work. They were married in 1973. By this time, his father was
semi-retired.
What was that?
Semi-retired.
Semi-retired, having invested in the construction of a resort in Jamaica. His foray into the travel business afforded him deep discounts on air travel and hotels. Some brothers approached him with the request that he make travel arrangements for a group that wanted to attend a district convention in Hawaii. The success of his venture spawned other group junkets to Brooklyn Bethel, the headquarters of Jehovah's Witnesses, and other destinations. Thus begins Cabin Tours Incorporated.
Frank was grateful to give up his stint as a janitor to assist his father in the travel business. It was a very happy time for Barbara and Frank, as all of their activities centered on the congregation, traveling with groups of witnesses to many exciting destinations and making contacts in Brooklyn, Bethel. Barbara Auxiliary premiered with Frank on occasion, and they rarely had any financial worries. Then came and went 1975. Well, we remember that well. Not surprisingly, their services as tour operators were less and less called upon as the Friends were in the process of regrouping and readjusting their thinking regarding day-to-day survival post-1975. Fortunately, Frank was able to reconnect with his witness contacts in the music business and was able to eke out a living and provide for his growing family. Their daughter Sarah was born in 1977, and son Peter came along in 1981. Al Cavallin, Frank's father, died in 1982. Fortunately, his mother was able to live quite well on her husband's music royalties and Social Security for the remainder of her life. She enjoyed much love and support from the congregation, as well as the love and support of all of her children. Frank's sisters and he were at her bedside when she died in 2005 at the age of 91. By the 1990s, it became necessary for Frank to seek work outside of music. Barbara, who had to help support their family in the mid-1980s, was working as a legal secretary and suggested he consider doing the same. Just as he was able to obtain work with no prior experience, Frank found that he could also. A medium-sized firm hired him in 1992. In 1998, they moved from the Beverly Hills congregation to the Bay congregation in Santa Monica, California. In 2001, he began working at a very large international law firm in Santa Monica. However, let's back up for a bit. In the late 1970s, Al Cavallin and Frank were asked to submit. Now, this is familiar to us, our generation of witnesses then. They were asked to submit songs for a new JW songbook that was being prepared. Frank submitted 4 songs, including music and lyrics, and his father submitted 1 song, music only. 2 of Frank's songs were accepted along with his father's song. Frank's lyrics were largely replaced, and the music was adjusted to accommodate the new lyrics. These 2 songs came out the other end as Song 191, Make the Truth Your Own, and Song 210, Make Sure of the More Important Things. The melody that his father submitted was actually composed by him during the Second World War as a jingle advertising war bonds. Lyrics were added, and the result was Song 19, Happy All Day Long. Al Cavallin died before knowing that his song had been accepted and published in the new songbook. Okay, here's the change now. In 1986, Frank was invited to join the staff of writers that arranged the Kingdom Melodies series of recordings. Anybody remember the Kingdom Melodies series of recordings? Oh, we all had them. Over the next 20 years, he traveled back to Bethel, usually twice a year, to work on Kingdom Melodies. This is so interesting to us because in 1986, we both were at Bethel. And we had heard that the orchestra was there and recording at different times. So he traveled back to Bethel usually twice a year to work on the melodies, dramas, special material for the Gilead graduations, and then later videos. He said it was a rich experience. Ironically, during this time, he built friendships with people who today wouldn't meet his eyes if they passed him on the street.
Some of these staff writers were and are professional musicians, and no one has been more critical of the songbook than these writers. The 1982 songbook was made up of music composed for the most part by amateur witness musicians from around the world, edited by a professional who was past his prime under the supervision of the governing body member, Carl Klein, an amateur musician himself. Too had a random sense of taste in music. An elderly brother who served in one of the South American branch offices wrote and edited the lyrics. The result was a collection of organizational instructions steeped in the sterile language of the New World Translation, set to very poor music. Even professional singers would have great difficulty singing most of these songs. When Frank withdrew his services in 2007, they were working on the new songbook that was announced at the 2009 District Regional Convention. Although he has not seen the finished product, he said it should have been an improvement owing to a more concentrated pool of talent, better supervision, and the elimination of a large portion of the 1982 songbook. Frank was appointed as an elder in 1975 at the age of 24 and served as such for 28 years. 26 years. He gave more time and energy to the congregation than to her and to their children. He sincerely wanted to be a force for good in the congregation and worked hard to that end. Barbara supported him in this, but naturally at times it put a strain on their marriage. Their daughter Sarah was disfellowshipped when he turned 18. Years later, when she was married in a civil ceremony held in her backyard, Frank and Barbara were in attendance. Gossip about this circulated among members of their former congregation. The elders contacted Bethel headquarters with their concerns. Their current congregation supported them, and there was quite a bit of back and forth with headquarters over this. The result was that Frank was removed as an elder. This moved Barbara to write the society about their draconian policy regarding disfellowship family members. The form letter she received in return did nothing to comfort her. It served to reinforce what Frank had already observed as an elder, that nobody can reason with or question the current policies of the governing body. Even though he didn't have the title elder, Frank was still active in the work at Bethel, and the congregation used him as much as possible. Whether the congregation recommended that he once again serve as an elder, one elder raised the question that Barbara was a low-hour publisher. There were legitimate reasons for her status. By the time Barbara's respect for the organization had ended significantly, this incident moved her to read the Bible with greater intensity to see how Scripture, all of it was. Thus began a process of discovery for her. A large issue for her was the fact that Jesus' teaching regarding the faithful and discreet slave was a parable, not a prophecy, and that the leadership arrogantly asserted that they are the fulfillment of that supposed prophecy. At the same time, it was evident that they blasphemously assumed the role of co-mediator with Jesus by asserting that salvation for the rank and file not possible apart from them.
So this is a time of great change in the Calvin's life. They're questioning their religion. Is there any questions, Rick? Do you have something you want to add to, or discuss right here, or should we continue? Okay, Rick. I will continue because I didn't hear anything.
Did you want me to come in, Barbara?
If you want to, before I continue on how Frank and his wife changed their whole world at this point, perhaps somebody would like to say something about it. Is there anybody who's listening that know the Cavalians?
Yeah, in fact, if you want to say hello to us, hit *6 on your telephone pad. And while they're waiting to come in, Barbara and Joe, and thank you, this is, it's always good. When I was leaving the Watchtower, if anyone could come on and give me any information at all about the goings on, what's going on behind the curtains, my ears, I couldn't get enough of it. I really couldn't. So I know there's a lot of PMOs listening in here tonight, and even though others might say, well, gee, it's just kind of mundane, ordinary. No, it's not. This is what Barbara has seen behind behind the curtain, so to speak, of the Watchtower. So it's just absolutely unbelievable, some of the things we see. Now, you mentioned Jarrett's right at the very outset. Now, he didn't have a very good reputation, did he, Barbara?
No. So many just didn't like him. But then he had devoted slaves at Bethel, but there weren't that many. People just they avoided him. His wife was okay. She was over the, actually she worked in the beauty shop. She was a beautician. And she had, there was of course a male who was overseer over her, but you'd never know it because she was a highly, highly opinionated woman. And so she wouldn't hesitate to tell you off if necessary. So they were an interesting couple, but not particularly endearing.
Well, when Richard Rowie, who is a good friend of yours, when Richard Rowie came on the program, we started 20 years ago. So I would say probably 18, 19 years ago, a woman by the name of Pat Gaza.
Oh, yes.
Now, Pat Gaza came on Richard's program, and I mean, she really nailed into Jarrett's.
Yes, she did.
She had nothing good to say about him. And then, of course, as we go downstream, more and more information comes out about Jarrett's. And boy, I'll tell you, he was a creepy guy. He was involved in a lot of things that weren't that wholesome. Let's go with that. So, I mean, she claimed that, he was a sexual pervert, I mean, have you heard things like that too, Barbara?
Well, she made a lot of claims, but she couldn't prove it. But she claimed when she was about 12 years old that she was molested. And she was a California girl. It was a difficult time with her. She's been deceased for quite a while, by the way. And that issue was never settled. But we did learn, and I was told at headquarters by some who were in the writing department that Jarrett's was dismissed from his position in Australia as a branch overseer because he molested. So that seemed to be amongst those who were running the organization. They seemed to accept that. But the Cavalians were very, I would say, talking to Frank, his family had nothing but admiration, and Jarrett's could be very, very nice if, because we had very close friends who also worked at the district assemblies. Our friend was an overseer of the accounting department at district assemblies, and Jairus was always involved with that. So they were very, very faithful to the Jairuses. So what can you say? You know, it's all these people are deceased, and this is just part of the talk and the history.
I'm glad we can speak up and talk. I mean, I don't look at it as gossip.
No,
I look at it as, you know, the Watchtower organization has hurt so many people, and I want people listening into this program tonight. I want them to realize that, you know, this isn't this squeaky clean Watchtower that many thought it was. There were some pretty creepy guys in there. But I just want to make mention too, Barbara. I want to let people know that that man sitting next to you, I think that is the man that really kept you in Bethel as long as you were in there. They needed him. I mean, they needed Joe. I mean, where were you going to get? Think about him. I know he knows all about plumbing. He was a plumber, and a good one at that. I know that for a fact, according to some of the things you told me. But, you know, they need people like Joe. And I don't know if they're going to find people like that today. Really, how many younger people, you know, 17, 18, are in plumbing? They're not. Yeah. And they need, you know, any organization needs a good plumber, a good electrician. And I know that that's one of the reasons, really, why Watchtower kind of coddled you guys to some degree. You know, they kind of put their arms around you and coddled you, and they didn't want you guys going anywhere. I mean,
you coddled.
Well, Joe, really, you were a valuable person to the Watchtower. They're not going to get a man that can come in and do plumbing. I got another man that I know. His name is Chewy. That's what he goes by. He calls in from Oklahoma, and he was at Bethel too, and he was a construction guy. And they need good, hard workers. And today, I'm not going to say they're not going to get them, but their chances of getting good, hard-working young people today, it's not like it was, you know, 30, 40 years ago. It's different, you know? Yeah, because I'm trying to...
People are not in the trades. So many men are not in the trades any longer. And it's hard to even find people in the trades in your local town. You know, there's everybody... young people want to be involved in the internet and all of that world.
In fact, Barbara, I'll tell you, I have a business. I'm still in business. I got some people working with me. And what I'm finding, I've been, you know, trying to get some help. A business is pretty strong right now, so I'm trying to get some help to come help me. So I got a lot of young people come in, but it's unreal. So I had one young guy working with me, and he was on his telephone all day long, and he's talking to his girlfriend. I said, yeah, how can you do the work while you're talking to your girlfriend on the phone? I mean, this is something probably Watchtower is dealing with too. I wonder if they let the Bethelites see what you have to do today. Even if you hire someone, they have to have a phone. You really can't tell them they can't use it, because, you know, it's considered, the government looks at it as an emergency. People need a phone. But I mean, to be on the phone all day long, talking to your girlfriend, I mean, that's what we're dealing with today. Now, I'm not going to say everyone's doing that, but my experience is that's the way it is. And the Watchtower's got to have a real difficult time today getting young Bethelites to come in and play by their rules. It's different than when you guys were in there.
They wouldn't permit it. They would not. No. You know, there's been so many changes in our world, and we're of another generation. But there's good things to be said about many of the young people, and especially about those who are raised in the organization that are leaving it. And what does it take to leave the organization? It takes study. I mean, you could just leave it and not be involved, but excuse me, it takes a bit of study and research to make yourself sure that you're doing the right thing.
Well, let's see if we can get someone to come in. We got a number of people coming in on the telephone line tonight. So if you'd like to say hello to Barbara and Joe Anderson, they're on here tonight. They were full-time Bethelites. You know that these guys have been exposing the Watchtower for many years. Why don't you say hello to them? Go ahead and hit *6. What would you like to say? And I've been listening to this story tonight, and they've been talking about, a man that really has been somewhat hurt by the Watchtower. And he is a very talented man, as you've heard Barbara and Joe say. So why don't you come in? What would you like to say? Is there any questions you have? Did you know some of the people that Barbara might know? She always loves that. She always, in fact, when people call in here and know people that she knew in Bethel, I tell you, her eyes light right up. She gets very excited. So go ahead, say hello to Barbara. Here's your chance to do it. Barbara, and look at. People say to me, well, who's the biggest apostate in the world? And they say, well, is it John Cedars? I say, no. Is it Mike and Kimmy? I say, no. Well, who is it? I say, it's Barbara Anderson. She's the biggest apostate in the world. There's no doubt about it. I mean, look at all the TV programs. Look at all of the exposure that Barbara has done. So here's your chance to talk to the biggest apostate in the world. Come on up in. Say hello to Barbara. Say hello to her husband, Joe. They'd love to hear from you. Hit *6. I'm going to put the telephone number up. We got a lot of people calling in, but I'm going to put the telephone number up because I really do think that we got a lot of people that would love to call in. But in the meantime, Barbara, go ahead and continue on. I'm here, and then we'll open the lines up a little bit, okay?
Good. Well, we'd love to talk to others, and eventually we'll run out of information about the catalyst. Hopefully they're listening. Frank said that he hoped he had the opportunity to listen in this evening. And one thing about him, he didn't leave the organization for selfish reasons. He studied and he did the research. And the organization's teachings, they held together until 1995. With myself and Joe, it was probably because I left by 96, 97. Frank is absolutely right. Everything was falling apart as far as their teachings, the policies, and the practices were under scrutiny. And but Frank said these words in his statements that he wrote. He said, when the governing body rendered Jesus' words regarding the generation that will not pass away until all these things occur meaningless in order to retain the 1914 chronology, Frank saw them regard their own tradition as more important than the clear words of Jesus. Over the next 10 years, Frank saw the effects on the leadership of having a less defined expectation of when, just a minute, I'll get rid of this. Less defined expectation of when the end would come while trying to sustain a sense of urgency within the membership. Yeah, that's true. It was hard to do. They kept telling us to be ready anytime. But they couldn't prove it. It was just words. He goes on to say, the increasing emphasis on the faithful slave and its governing body, and the increasing demands that we trust and obey them, replaced motivation based on the content. And he has content in he has italicized it, of their teachings. Thus, Frank believed, was due to the governing body's losing a measure of confidence in its own teachings and discerning the need to be more assertive in demanding loyalty and obedience. Yeah, you had to be a loyal to them. But did we have the confidence to be loyal in them? That was the question. The emphasis was on increased activity, and it it was just for its own sake. It replaced the emphasis on that which properly motivates such activity. So what motivates that? They tell us to get out, do more. And, but yet, why? Over time, Barbara and Frank lost any joy they had in connection with the congregation. Their joy returned somewhat when they simply read the Bible. Okay, listen carefully to this, because don't jump to any conclusions by what Frank is going to say in his record here, recording his life. He said, their prior Bible reading had always been through the subjective lenses of the organization's teachings. A more objective reading provided an understanding of the marvels of God's grace, as opposed to the limiting, condescending, and guilt-inducing, undeserved kindness of the New World Translation. It became more evident that in the first century, it was the power of the Holy Spirit acting on individuals that made possible the spread of the good news about Jesus, not some central governing body in Jerusalem. The importance of faith in Christ and his role as a singular mediator between God and man stood out to them as never before. Once they had sufficient indication from the scriptures that there might be another way of understanding them, the Calvinists made a thorough investigation of their religion, including its history and development. That's exactly right. That's exactly what we did too. You start to check on this stuff before you just believed it, and then you started to realize that you can't go on like that, and then you do some checking, historical checking, and the development of the organization, and what an eye-opener. By 2007, the Calvinists could no longer in good conscience support the organization, and would have probably come to this realization earlier had his mother not lived as long as she did. She was emotionally dependent on Frank, mainly because he was the only one of her children who had embraced her religion. Frank resigned from all congregation responsibilities, that's 2007, and withdrew his participation in the society's music projects. Their leaving was abrupt, not gradual, and their closest friends shunned them from the start because they had shared with them some of their reasons for leaving. Frank said the first year after leaving the congregation was harder on Barbara than on him. He explained that she is a social person who enjoys entertaining friends at their home. Naturally, it hurt them both to lose lifelong friends as they realized the conditional nature of those friendships. Well, we all know that. We all experience that. Joe's going to continue. I'm going to rest my voice. And so he's going to continue on.
This is the
right
book?
There. Yeah, just read. Mm-hmm.
Okay. After 2 years of inactivity, Frank received an official call from a longtime friend inviting us to a judicial committee meeting. He was told that there was sufficient evidence that his teachings provided basis for judicial action. Their efforts to explain themselves and even defend themselves to their close friends had been construed as teaching in reality. They never sought to draw away others from the organization. When asked if he wanted to write a letter of disassociation, Frank declined, as Barbara and he had previously decided that writing a disassociating letter was playing by the organization's rules. This was their initiative, and he wanted the judicial committee to finish what they had started rather than for him and his wife to finish for them. So he declined on behalf of both of them the invitation to attend the judicial meeting. Frank knew and thus stated that the Judicial Committee would do as it was told. A few days later, Frank was informed that he and Barbara had been disfellowshipped for apostasy. They would not appeal the decision.
Mm-hmm.
During the appeal period for 1 week, they sent the following letter to approximately 22 of their oldest and closest friends. Dear so-and-so, this week it will be announced that we are no longer Jehovah's Witnesses. We owe you, our friends of many years, an explanation. We love and miss you deeply. We are not upset over the human imperfections of anyone, being fully aware of our own imperfections. Thus we have been hurt on occasion, but who hasn't? We are not disgruntled or bitter. Our withdrawal over the past 2 years is the product of over 10 years of legitimate questioning and subsequent research, carried out and prayerfully and objectively. We have not rushed to any of our conclusions. We have not left God, his Son, or his Word. Jesus warns and Paul counsels that it is our obligation to carefully evaluate religious affiliations and teachings. Thus, we do not believe we are sinning against the Holy Spirit by evaluating the organization and its teachings in the light of the Scriptures and fact. Genuine truth stands up to such scrutiny. The organization does not. Those who have gone before us in making such an evaluation have been slandered and vilified by those loyal to the organization. We expect to be treated differently. However, we hope that the brief explanation will leave you with some understanding of why, in good conscience, we can no longer support the organization.
The letter that the Cavalians sent to their friends, 22 of their oldest and closest friends, continued. I think many of us can identify, who are listening to this, identify with the Cavalians' statements. They touched everything that we've heard before that people were trying to say about the organization. In fact, this is more of what they said. We are not driven by pride. Isn't that what the Watchtower said? Apostates. They're driven by pride. And he says, as we are admitting the mistake of supporting out of our own negligence and lack of information for most of our lives, erroneous teachings, revisionist history, deception, and unloving policies. He says, we are willing to wait on Jehovah, and we continue to do so. However, it is clear to us that waiting on Jehovah is not the same thing as waiting on the organization. Shun us if you must, but please know that we will never judge you, but will always accept you, love you, and never forget you. Love, they signed the love, Frank and Barbara. With regard to this letter, they received a number of responses. Most of them were predictable. However, a couple of them were actually kind and non-judgmental. Now, how did the Cavalians do after all of this? How did they react? What was their life like? He writes, the social vacuum that was created when they became inactive was gradually filled with new friends. Isn't that the truth? Those who saw the light before the Cavalians did, including their children and wonderful families. Although the first year was difficult, their newfound freedom was certainly worth the pain. Having more time to pursue art, music, travel, and study, Frank said, improved their lives beyond anything they could have imagined in this old system. At that point, after their disfellowshipping in 2009, both the Cavalians stated that they had no desire to affiliate with any religious group. Okay, so that is really the conclusion of that period. So this is a little bit ago now, after 2009, we've got a number of years have passed by. What about today? Well, there's a postscript, and it's beautiful. He says, as a postscript to the above account, he added that Barbara and he are now both retired. They bought a beautiful home in the Palm Springs, California area. Barbara's talents as an artist are evident in her growing number of paintings. She continues her art studies and assists teaching art classes. He is still composing music, managing his publishing catalog, and recording in the studio attached to their house. Sounds like a lovely life. They made it for themselves. They took difficult times and they turned it into wonderful times. So maybe people are wondering about their religious feelings. What do they have any religious beliefs? Or I'm asked that all the time. I say, I'm not discussing my beliefs. Joe won't discuss his beliefs either. It's very divisive. And who cares anyway? Why should someone pattern their beliefs after someone else's beliefs or whatever? Well, this is what Frank wrote. As far as religious belief is concerned, the Calvinists are not concerned with whether God exists or with further study of the Bible, as they are content not knowing what happens after death and are free of the need to conform to a prescribed course of action so as to be granted an afterlife. What they do concern themselves with is learning, being alive, and being in the lives of their children, grandchildren, and other family members and friends. And that's the end of their story. So they're happy. And I think the moral of this whole story is there is happiness after this religion. And too many individuals have been so hurt by the organization, especially the shunning, and so they do not care about living any longer, or maybe they care but they can't put up with having no one. That's what happens. They have no one, and that is a problem even in our country today, that people are not, they don't have many associates, and they're kind of lost. They don't know how to make friends. So we thought that this story would be so helpful for those who had what they thought was a rich life as a JW, and came to realize that it wasn't what they thought it was. And so they are trying to make a new life. There is happiness after the Watchtower. There are very good people out there who help others in many, many ways. And we see that through the tragedies that we have been watching on television, the hurricanes and all the issues. There are those who come and help others. And that's very, very important. The same way with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses. We're there for you, and we'll talk and we'll help you, whatever it takes. Now, you can't ask us for big money because most of us don't have big money, but we can help you psychologically, and you have our empathy, because we lived it, we went through it the same as you did. And you're we all carry the same baggage. So we're like family. And that's, somebody just wrote that on the comments. And so I would say that we should seek out others who have successfully navigated shunning, and let us help you to put together a new life. There have been plenty of us, like the Cavillons, who have been successful. You don't necessarily have to be a top researcher or on the internet trying to convince others. There's so many ways. I say volunteer. I did when I was newly out. I volunteered. I volunteered for the Red Cross, the organization that the Watchtower hated. And it was so rewarding. So, and then you little by little make a life for yourself. But you have to seek out other people. You can't do it alone. The loneliness it'll get you. So that is the Cavillon's life. We'd like to hear more about your lives. Feel free to call in, and Rick has invited you to call in, and we can chat for a few minutes. You have questions, or if you have statements to make to help others, we would appreciate that.
Wow, we really would, Barbara. Listen, we have got Barbara Anderson. She's on the program here tonight. Here's a chance. Well, you've been listening to some of the things she says. She has so many stories of her and Joe being in the Watchtower in Bethel. So now here's your chance to talk to Barbara Anderson. She's on here with us tonight. Why don't you muster up the courage and come in? Go ahead. You're on with us.
Hello?
Go ahead.
Hi, this is 312 Stephen in Illinois. Mr. Anderson, I just had a question. First of all, I love listening to you, and it's nice to see your husband as well. And I thank you for all that you have done and will do. I just had a question. Where do you think, from a monetary standpoint, that Watchtower went so wrong? Because the organization, as you know and I know, is nothing the way it was, back in the day. And you're a little bit older than me, so I'm sure you probably have fonder recollections even than I. Where do you feel like they went wrong and really started becoming this, materialistic corporation, all about, building and real estate and all, amassing wealth, in other words? When do you feel like that happened?
I'm not an expert at any of that. Now, I did know when I was in the engineering department that, and having dealings with the accounting department, that they made very poor decisions. They didn't even follow the suggestions of accountants that would come into Bethel on how to run an organization. So I think back then it was stupidity. People who were running the organization were men who were affiliated with it from the time that they were young, and they had no experience on the outside. And eventually they became the overseers of the different departments. I saw greed. I saw stealing. So it was obvious why. I have an accounting background, and so I realized what they needed, but they were arrogant. And so, I think uneducated people, as I was at one point in my life as a witness until I sought out education, the less you know, the more arrogant you seem to be. You don't need that, but you do need it. You need schooling, and by forbidding higher education, they really, really put themselves in a mess. I think over the years that they've gone up to the opposite, especially since the real wealthy people in the organization have died off. And of course, that's my observation, because I knew some of the big donors, and they gave their money and the society went through it, and it cost a lot of money to operate such a huge organization. They really didn't do it right, is all I can say. So nowadays, I can't speak for these men. I just don't know them. I'm finding out, just like you all are finding out, about the new governing body member and his background in the real estate business. We're also finding out about and I'm sure that's what you have in mind, the three corporations in Ireland. What is all that about, except making money, big money?
Right.
So I can't go any further than that, but I do have some people that are carefully watching that, who are friends, and but we don't have any black and white answers, or I don't at this point. Maybe some of the others do. Maybe we can discuss this in the future.
Okay. Yeah, I just wondered, because it was so disheartening to find this organization is nothing as to what we believed it was. We believed it was an honest organization. They didn't care about money. It was just about, serving God, and this is the greatest place on earth. And then you look behind the scenes, and they're a corporation like any other corporation. There was a video just this week that just blew me away partially, but it was an ex-Bethelite as well. He might even be listening. But he was talking about, he was in the computer department back in the day, and he was talking about how there was a computer program that Watchtower had written, and I believe it was MEPS. And
I know about that.
Circuit overseer. Yeah, I remember the circuit overseer or the district overseer, I forget which, gave a talk about how one of the largest corporations in the world, software development corporations in the world, essentially gave Watchtower a blank check and said, give us that program. You write any number on this check, and you can have that, and we can have the software. But Watchtower, we wouldn't sell it because it's not to make profit. It's for it's for translating our literature to preach the good news around the kingdom. And then you find out in reality that they packaged that software, and this was in the video just this week, from a Bethelite who was in the computer department. They sold it to S&P, Standard & Poor's. They sold it to IBM. And I know that they sold MEPS to Microsoft. And I found out about that.
Westinghouse. They sold,
what?
They sold programs that were invented at headquarters to Westinghouse.
Yeah. And this is my point. For those of us on the outside, which is why the information you give us is so invaluable, we thought that this organization was really doing what they said they were doing, not making commercial profit. And then you find out that they're making money hand over fist in every way imaginable. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you for what you've done. You definitely answered my question, and I'll just go back on you and listen. Thank you.
I wish I could have really gone into it. But there are people that are looking into this, be assured. One of the things that really disturbed me, and I'm not hesitant about saying this, because what I know is what y'all know, is that these three corporations in Ireland, all the assets of the Watchtowers have been put in those three corporations' names. So how is this going to affect suing the Watchtower? Evidently, they have nothing, because all the assets are in the hands of these three corporations. So
that would be the reason why they did it. And I'll tell you something else very quickly. I used to work for a company that was owned by one of the biggest international banking conglomerates, and we would have to go through training about 4 times a year to discuss money laundering and all kinds of things and make sure that we were doing things above board. And there was a newspaper headline that we discussed at length, and the person that they hired, that Watchtower hired to be over those Ireland corporations, he was a part of the company, the bank that he worked for was a part of the largest lawsuit for money laundering, antitrust, all of that. And this is the same person that was running the risk department that Watchtower just hired over those three corporations. So you take this bank, which is very dirty, and then you take the head of the risk department at that time, and that's who they hired. That speaks volumes about Watchtower. It really does.
Yeah, you wonder, don't you? You know, what are they doing? I think we'll all find out, though, in the near future, because there's so much there are many investigations into the Watchtower. And I noticed that the other day, you know, the article that came out from Japan, taking a second look at the Watchtower and children and their attitude to our children. And it was in Japanese, and it was hard to understand the translation even. But as long as these governments are looking at Watchtower closely, that's what's important. And if you look hard enough, you'll find it, as Norway did. But Watchtower is, I found out now that in the conference in Poland just recently, the government conference, the Watchtower is trying to have this reopened in Norway. You know, they're going to fight to the death. And it's always over money, because they didn't get their over $1 million for a few years in Norway to support their religion. So why is it always over money? What happened to the message? Before, it used to be the message was important, not the people. Now it's not even the message, it's the money. So, you know, it's like the three.
That was my whole point. Yeah. We got involved with this organization from an idealistic standpoint, that they were about doing nothing but serving God, trying to make disciples, showing brotherly love, and all the while they're selling us this message, this is what they were doing behind the scenes. But you're absolutely right. I'm going to go back on mute, otherwise I'll hog the whole conversation. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Rick.
Yeah, in fact, well, that was Stephanie's out there in Illinois. But anyways, Barbara, we've got a lot of people listening in here tonight. They're listening in on the telephone line. So listen, why don't you call in? We have now, Barbara Anderson has been around quite a while talking about the Watchtower. She's helped so many people that have been, you know, victims of sexual child abuse. But, you know, she has more information to share with you. I mean, she knows where the bones are buried. So why don't you say hello to Barbara? Hit *6. Come on. She'd love to hear from you. Go ahead. You're on with us.
Somebody asked, what is MEPS?
Go ahead. You're on. Go ahead, Barbara. I think we have, is it 603? I'm not sure. 603. You're on with us.
Hey, Rick and Barbara, Paul Coley here. How are you guys?
Hey, Paul. Good. Nice to hear your voice.
Yeah, good to hear you too. I was listening to the talk about MEPS and money, and I keep thinking, you know, how, of course, it takes a massive amount of money to keep this organization going, but they've built really state-of-the-art video production facilities that they could always rent out if they ever needed a little bit of money, if they're not already doing something like that.
Well, since they put all the assets around the world in the hands of those three Irish corporations, it doesn't seem like that it's just about one certain thing. There's a lot of here that needs explaining, and but the opportunity to sue the Watchtower is being removed, and there are people who are saying that this was breaking the back of the Watchtower. I'm not saying that. There are those who are saying, and they had to do something because the lawsuits were constantly being filed because their teachings weren't changing. They're changing on superficial things, but they really weren't changing on the child abuse, of the protection of abusers is still the problem. And of course, we don't know what's going on within the legal world and the Watchtower. When we do find out, we'll certainly share it. But
Yeah, I just can't imagine how much this is cutting into their operating costs. You know, all the lawsuits. But I'm gonna mute myself and let you guys get back to it. But it was good hearing from you again.
yeah, you too. Take care.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Oh, well, we had a number of people on. You want to come back on 978? I believe that was Susan. We did have a number of people. If you want to come in, now is your chance to say hello to Barbara Anderson. She has been around. She knows what's going on behind the curtains of the Watchtower. Go ahead, 978. I think that's Susan. I think that's my wife.
Hey.
Hi, Barbara.
Hey, Susan.
I'm very glad to be able to talk to you. You know, a lot has been changing with the governing body lately. And again, Tony Morris, they asked him to leave. Do you have any further information as to why maybe was asked to leave?
Actually, no, I don't know. He just disappeared, didn't he? It just plumb disappeared. So, you wonder why. See, and we're not getting any answers, and they don't want to give us any answers either. Yeah, so I can't. I wish
and
I could.
And then they're adding so many extra members lately, last few years. What's going on with that, do you think?
You know, as I said, they're not giving any clues except the money stuff, and some of that they lost control with it. They didn't really, from what I gather, appreciate the information coming out about the 3 corporations in Ireland, but that came out in business journals, and so they're usually trying to work behind the scenes, manipulating government and fighting for their rights. I know people who are involved with class action lawsuits. So everything's in the middle right now. You know, there's no conclusive statements that I can give on this, on any of these issues. Sorry to say, I'd love to, but I don't know. I'm like everybody else. I'm wondering why this, why that. I think I've outlived the organization that I knew, that I once knew. It's an entirely different organization today. So I can only talk about the past, when it was growing at the leaps and bounds, and then went on an entirely different track. And what can I say? I mean, even their beliefs, they don't even talk about their beliefs. You know, when is the last time you ever heard?
They are changing some of them. I mean, they've made some, I won't say silly, but I guess they are silly with the beards, pants, and you know, they're doing things like that. The governing body's approving that, and I'm wondering, you know, they're adding more. They're making silly new rules, and well, I mean, they're not silly, but they've made an impact, and I don't think it's exactly what they were thinking, but.
Yeah, I don't know.
They are changing.
The remarks by Jackson, the governing body member Jackson, after the main announcement at the annual meeting about the 2 men who were chosen to be part of the governing body, he was almost like he was ridiculing the people that were hearing this by saying, "Oh, you're going to be all over the internet searching and trying to find answers and whatever." He was making fun of this. It was a very serious. Very serious to those who were believers. But I don't think these men are believers at all. They're not. They're just manipulators. And they use religion, and it's a business. But that's because by your actions, you show where your heart is. And to make the kind of statements he did, it's almost like making fun of people who are going to do some research after they made their announcement about this one particular governing body member, and his history, because he knew if we'd find out his history, into mega bucks money in the real estate world. So what can we say? Oh, people want to know what MEPS is, Rick. So that is kind of important here. Someone said MEPS is an abbreviation that stands for Multi-Language Electronic Photo Typesetting System. It is a system that Jehovah's Witnesses themselves have developed for getting written material published quick. Well, they don't even publish written material, much of any. So that's why they stole MEPS, because they weren't using it. Maybe that's just my joke.
Well, no doubt, Barbara. I mean, you've seen a lot of the Watchtower, and obviously, I got a couple of questions. I was just thinking about while people were calling you in and asking questions. I got a thought when you were on Dateline back in 2001, I believe it was. I'm really surprised that NBC was willing to stick their neck out. Today, the news media is so cautious. They're so afraid to say anything that could indict them. But now, when you went on NBC Dateline program back in 2001,
2002.
2002. I'm sorry. Did they in any way prep you on what you could say and what you couldn't say? Did they do that?
No. The reason for it is that I had presented NBC the material that proved what I was contending. That material went to their lawyers. I had to do that. So otherwise they were afraid that this is what one of the men I worked with at NBC told me. He said that they were concerned that the Watchtower would sue them, that the Watchtower was so sue happy, so that, and they gave the appearance as being so powerful. So I gave the attorneys them, and Watchtower knows this. Back then they knew what I had, and since I had been the person that put together the material on child abuse that went to all the governing body members, 2 weeks after I left Bethel, it was given to each member of the governing body, showed them what an international problem this was. And this material was gone over very, very well by people in the writing department. So the proof was all there. And then once the lawyers saw what the governing body were given, and that they knew what was happening with child abuse, they didn't concern themselves about the Watchtower suing them any longer, because the Watchtower couldn't stand on their arguments that that this wasn't so, and they didn't. It was that's a long time ago. I really didn't worry about them not following through, NBC's people, because we recorded it in 2001. It was almost a year. We recorded it. They did the entire Dateline program. It was supposed to air in November of 2001, but that was around the time that the airplanes went into the buildings. So that was right at that period, 9/11. And so they put our program off until the following May of 2002, May 28th. But they were always determined they were going to show the program because we had the proof. And of course, then there was the interviews with the victims. What could they do? That was the beginning of Watchtower's Watchtower's. I'd say the growth. That was the beginning. In fact, Bob Johnson was in the service department. He was a leading member of the service department. He went to the same congregation Joe and I did, and we had long conversations with him in the car about this or that, but never about anything child abuse, so forth. So anyway, after Dateline, our son went up to Bethel to ask Bob Johnson about the situation. And Bob Johnson was one of the men who had the signature on the contract with the United Nations that the society was involved with. So he was a power. He's not at Bethel any longer. I heard that he was in Florida at one point, but I think he's deceased. He would be very, very old now. Anyway, he told our son that thousands and thousands of people had left the organization after the Dateline program. And because of what your mother did, Bob said to Lance. And he said, consequently, she's responsible for thousands and thousands of deaths at Armageddon. So, yes, many, many people left over that organization, over the Dateline program. And so it was a time of change after that. And then in 2007, I was on NBC Nightly 2008, NBC Nightly News. And we talked about the $12.5 million settlement, secret settlement that the Watchtower made with, 16 victims in 9 lawsuits. All that information we got, it was secret information. It was never to come out, and a mistake was made at a courthouse, and that's how I found out about the settlement. So it's been proven that they are responsible for what happened by their policies of protecting Jehovah's Witnesses, lawbreakers, if they are repentant. And now they say that they report to the authorities, but it's not the same organization at all. I mean, they just don't have the control they had back in those years. It's an altogether different situation. It's like a new organization as far as I'm concerned, because these people don't even think like the old guard when the organization was growing by leaps and bounds in the 80s. My God, that was a statement by the United Nations that around 84 that peace and security was here, and we just went nuts over that. I think I wrote that out once before. We thought that was it, because the Bible says when they say peace and security, sudden destruction will overwhelm. Look how long ago that was. So time has taken care of this organization. What can they say about the future? So they can't say anything about the future, because everything they did say, nothing happened. So that's about all I can say. I can talk about the past. I'm not on the inside of I know people are, and I know there's people who are really, really investigating whether they're going to find out anything. I don't know. I heard just recently that Watchtower is worth $10 billion. I can't imagine $10 billion. But they were worth that, and all those assets are in the hands of those 3 corporations. If anybody can testify to that statement was correct, it would be interesting.
Yeah, in fact, Barbara, I'll jump in here. That of course, the Watchtower organization, as you well know, and many people listening in here to the six screens tonight know it. In Ireland, they set up an asset managing company.
Yeah.
Now, you say, well, what is an asset managing company? Well, wealthy people that have a lot of assets, they hire people to manage their assets and invest in certain stocks and real estate and what have you, so that they can make more money. So the Watchtower organization, according to this Irish business, it'd be like the Wall Street Journal here in America. It was an Irish business newspaper.
That's right.
They said the Watchtower organization is worth $10 billion. Now that is in assets. Now that's not cash.
No.
Now there's a difference. There's a difference between cash and assets. But with all of their real estate and all of their holdings real estate wise, if you add them all up, it would be $10 billion. Now, I'm not going to tell you here tonight that the Watchtower is cash poor. They're not. In fact, I'm reading here tonight, and I'll be bringing up on JW World News a little bit from now, that in Denmark, the country is all upset with Jehovah's Witnesses. And one of the big issues, I mean, we know child sex abuse, we know shunning, we know blood not accepting it is a big problem. But in Denmark, they're focusing on an issue that really has a lot of legs. And they're saying that the Watchtower organization is extracting or coercing people into leaving them real estate when they die. And Denmark's all upset about that. They're saying that the Watchtower is doing things that are somewhat, they didn't use the word fraudulent, but I'll use the word fraudulent. They're coercing people. They are coercing people to give their money up. I'm going to read it tonight right here on the Six Screens, JW World News. An 81-year-old person, she was on her deathbed, and the elder and his wife came in and pushed her into signing her will over to the Watchtower, Barbara. This is happening all over, not just in Denmark. Yeah.
Yeah, I talked to people over the years who were very, very angry at the way that the Watchtower treated them over the money in the wills. Rude people out of Watchtower calling up and saying calling attorneys, calling heirs of who should have been heirs, children, saying where is the money, and that we were supposed to get. So it became all about money. Just beyond me. And then they turn around and they build such a places of work. What do they need anything like that? And then the Geico buildings, what they're projecting, and then they keep quoting 8 million. I think I just saw that yesterday, quoting that there are 8,800,000 witnesses or something like that. Well, that's an old figure. I mean, it was less a few years ago, but they keep adding to that figure like that's exactly how many. Well, we all know that's not true. There are no 8 million. If they got 4 million, they're that's even an overstatement. So it's all about trying to impress everybody who they are. I don't know. But by their works, we know them, and their works aren't good.
Well, there you go. It's just it's unbelievable what they're doing. And of course, you gave me information this week, and it's all over the internet. And we do have a new governing body member, And I just want the people listening in here tonight, we'll go over it in somewhat detail tonight. I'll
Good.
play the video. But we do have a new governing body member, and this is very suspicious, Barbara. This is very suspicious to me that we have Jody Jadell. Jody Jadell, he is a new governing body member. They just appointed him at the annual meeting last week, last Saturday, and now we're finding out a lot more about Jody Jadell. And Barbara, I'll tell you, if people that are loyal to the Watchtower, they're still in there believing everything the Watchtower tells them. If they found out about Jody Jadell, I think that they would be heading for the exit door. Now, Jody Jadell, the new governing body member, we now realize is a pretty highfalutin real estate expert.
Yeah.
So why would you think, Barbara? And I'm sure even the audience is thinking, why would the Watchtower bring in a governing body member that is that has a high position in real estate intelligence? He knows a lot about it. Why do you think that would happen, Barbara?
Because the selling of the Kingdom Halls and pocketing the money. There are some really awful stories about this money business on the internet. People are Kingdom Halls congregations are being demanded to pay a certain amount of money right away, and the congregation doesn't have it, and then they can't pay it. It's thousands of dollars, and it's a long story about what they charge every month. One congregation had paid $1,000 a month to the society, to the branch, and their charge just went up. It's 3 meetings at that congregation, Kingdom Hall, and the charges went up to $1,500 a month. Not the publishers, well, they don't call them publishers because they don't publish anything, or the associates. So they haven't got any more associates. So now they're asking $1,500 a month, and that's $18,000 a year. Why? I mean, we accomplished an awful lot years ago in the preaching work. I mean, we accomplished what we set out to be, to convert people to the message that we thought was true, and it wasn't about money. So how did they expect to attract people when they're charging them all this head tax, almost like, and for using a building? And if you can't pay it, then they take the building. So they need expertise on real estate, and they purchased the Geico property. Maybe that was a problem. Hendricks, who was instrumental in doing that, is no longer with them either, and that was a lot of his dealings, was that Geico property. So maybe they need an expert to advise them on this stuff and stop getting stuck with it, or not. I mean, Ramapo is another thing. All that property, I think 2009 is when they bought it, and they're saying we're going to build. They haven't built. They got a tractor there once in a while to prove that they got a purpose with it, and because they got approval years ago to build on it. So to keep that approval okay by the town, they try to put a tractor and move dirt around a little bit. Well, maybe they're property rich and money poor. I don't know, but they needed advice. What I can't figure out is they can get advice without making people a governing body member. Why make somebody like that, who's open to suspicion, and like Jackson was making fun of, like, oh, you all are going to find out about all of this, and then you're going to go on the internet and find, like making fun of us for looking into this. So I don't appreciate his sense of humor. So anyway, maybe, they're their own worst enemy.
Well, we've got more people want to come in. Let's go. We had a person just in here. We got a number of people, but we'll go back to Chicago. Did you want to come in and say a little about?
Hi,
Go ahead. You're on with us.
hi, Stephen again.
Yes,
Stephanie again. I just had a quick question. If Miss Anderson watched the latest annual meeting, and if she noticed whether Samuel Hurd was there, and if he wasn't, maybe she could comment on why.
No, I heard he wasn't there. I have no idea. I couldn't tell you a bit. I know about some of these people's past as circuit overseers or district overseers years and years ago. I don't know about their present, and I can just plead ignorance. I wish you'd ask a question that goes back in my generation, because this one is what I'm going to do next time I come on here. I'm going to call up some of the people that have info and see if they want to let me talk about it or something like that. What can I say?
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I just wondered, because to miss an annual meeting, in my opinion, is huge, unless you are boycotting for some reason, angry, pissed off on your way out, or there's some sort of health, issue. Because even Stephen Lett, who looked like death warmed over, not only was he there, but he gave some god awful comments. But for her to not even be there and not be represented, maybe in a video presentation of some kind, just led to a lot of speculation as to whether his health is bad, or did he intentionally boycott? Was that in reaction to the appointment of these two new governing body members who were both American Caucasian and not representing the organization, which is supposed to be, a worldwide organization, worldwide brotherhood. So, yeah, if you could find out anything else about that, that'd be awesome.
That's good points that you mentioned. They don't represent. Who would they represent? The wealthy of the world who are investing, so in this organization. People go the opposite direction from this organization. They are enjoying it. I don't know.
Right.
So maybe it's just a survival. They're trying to survive. I heard a number of years ago and I knew that this was factual, that one of the men that they brought in over the years, who was the head over the accounting, finances, and he had a terrible reputation in Europe, terrible. And yet they brought him in and put him over a major department. So whether he's still there, I don't know. He had a very difficult, and I've said it before, a German name that I couldn't even pronounce. And but he did not have a good reputation. So, but I don't know why they risk this. They don't care about their associates, since they don't have members any longer. They don't care about pleasing anybody.
No, and it was such a slap in the face, I would imagine, because your spiritual qualification is why you should have been picked to be a governing body member. Spiritual qualifications. And so here they brought in, somebody said on one of the videos, he came in 2020, I think it was. So he's been, one of the two governing body members had only been at Bethel less than 4 years, and was moved past all of those, governing body helpers of all different ages and ethnicities, and made to be a governing body member. And it's so obvious why, with his real estate connections. And again, that really goes to, this organization cares more about money, not even representing its own members, and certainly not about spiritual qualifications. But then they'll tell us that that's what the governing body is all about, is their spiritual qualifications. Okay, thank you, Barbara. I look forward to when you come back on. If you have any more information on that, I'm going to go back on mute. Thank you.
I'm going to keep this in mind. Sometimes we hear things that we can't really talk about because we have no proof. And that's difficult because you like to pass along rumors, but it's fun. But in this case, it's so serious. Lives are at stake. They really are, for those who are being shunned by their relatives who still are witnesses. And So that's why I keep doing what I do, is because I feel so bad for people who are shunned, and who are those in a few weeks ago, there were 3 women who commit suicide, shot themselves in the head because of the long time period that they've been shunned, and they just didn't want to live anymore. It just is so sad, and at the same time, that's so serious. This is serious, and this organization is all about money, prominence, property. So I don't know. What can you say? The best thing that could happen for this organization is that it would just disappear. And there's a lot of organizations that exist that are very wealthy. You never hear about them. Wouldn't this be great? I don't care if they have a lot of money. I really don't care if this is, they got a lot of company of big time multi-billionaires in this world today. But the harm to people, and the young people who are being forced to go to the kingdom hall and they hate it, that still goes on. And they have a right to make choices and have a life for themselves. So I rest my case, Rick.
Oh my goodness, Barbara, we got a lot of people that have been listening in tonight. I really am amazed at it. I think it's good that we can have you come on here and spill the beans on the Watchtower. But Barbara, I wanted to ask you a question before we cut you loose here tonight, and I really appreciate Joe coming on as well. But
I lost your picture. I don't see you. Why don't I see you?
Hold on 1 second. Let me see what's going on here. Okay, let me come on. I will come on. Start the cam.
Now it's just me.
Sometimes things get a little crazy here. There I am. All right. So anyways, Barbara, what I want to say to you is, you have been around. You have got a lot of people that have written you emails. People have visited you in Tennessee. You know a lot of people, more people than most of us know. So the question I would ask you at this juncture is, with all the people that you have talked to, all the people that have suffered from sexual child abuse in the Watchtower and other issues as well, in your years of exposing the Watchtower, Barbara, well, what would you say would be the most, I'm not going to say interesting, but the most terrible experience of someone in the Watchtower related to you? Could you share that with us? Whether it's sex abuse? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I have even while I was at in the writing department there the last year, I was talking to people on the phone and who were molested. I mean, this was just. There's a lot of familial molestation. That's a fact within families, and that's not reported. I think 91% of familial abuse is not reported. But within the witnesses, I've heard gross things. I mean, it was where a group of elders would molest many children, and it was a Chicago group when I was at Bethel I heard about, and there was a number of men all involved in this, and they got away with it, and they molested many children, and that kind of molestation that some of them were involved with was sadistic, and that upset us the most. One of the men in the writing correspondence, he was especially angry over all of this, hearing this. And there were 5 men in writing correspondence that we're getting phone calls and all of this. I don't hear too much about. I know there's a lawsuit that was recently settled, and that was a case where it was ritual abuse over the years by a number of men in a house, and that had a basement that had a room for abuse. Those are the ones that. What can you say? I mean, it's horrible. Whether that any of that goes on now, I don't see the circumstances like they used to be, which let itself happen because nobody would believe it. But now there's just too much exposure about Jehovah's Witnesses and child abuse, so they can't really these people who do this, including women. They don't. They can't take chances like they did back in those years. It was you live and don't get caught. You live and breathe and don't get caught, and over again. And that's what they were doing. And so many were victims, and many of those victims have their lawsuits are long settled. So they've Watchtower's put out millions and millions of dollars. So I don't. That's all I can say is the ones that I heard the worst of information about were the ritual abusers in secret. I've heard the Covington's. I think it was to do with Covington's son, who stumbled on it. On ritual abuse in the Kingdom Hall years ago. That was an extraordinary story. And I looked into his death, and when I did that, I was told he died a few days after he saw what he did. And he was found hanging in his garage. And so I got the death certificate. Sure enough, the death certificate said he hung himself, and but some people said, like his family members, that he was depressed. But the whole story that I got from somebody in writing correspondence was, no, he wasn't depressed. He stumbled on ritual abuse in a Kingdom Hall on a Saturday night, and so there was the thought that the man that told me about it said that they thought that he was murdered. What can you believe back then to be true? It was just overwhelming, this kind of stuff. But nobody was putting any credence. Society wasn't putting any credence. The legal department didn't even know about all of it. The service was keeping all of this a secret. I know what I know, and that was a big issue. It took years before the governing body made an announcement that within the writing department that all anything to do with child abuse that the service department heard about had to be reported to the legal department. They weren't even involved. Service was they ran the whole show. The men that ran the service department ran the whole show of the organization. It was governing body. Jairus was the man over the service department. It was no wonder that the child abuse stuff was hidden, because the accusations against him was that he was a child abuser. And that's why he lost his position in Australia. So is it a wonder why that I left the organization over this? I still was a believer. I believe what the Bible said about living forever on the earth, and I wanted to see it. Hearing what I heard from men and high positions, Lloyd Berry never, ever questioned that these things weren't true. And he was over the writing department. I know what he said. He said it to me. So So I didn't really think that happens that much in this organization because it's an entirely different organization. That's all. I rest my case.
Well, my goodness, Barbara, I do believe we had Larry. Did you want to come on, say hello to Barbara? We had another call coming in from New York. Larry, did you want to say hello to Barbara? Go ahead, come back on with us. Yeah, you're on the 6th. Yeah.
Good evening to Barbara. Barbara, this is South Jersey calling all the way to you. I'm a former Bethelite, and I have to try to take advantage of this opportunity to ask you what happened to some certain very important and very famous people up there at Bethel, because, of course, you were at Bethel after I left. I left Bethel. I fell right through in, I believe it was right around 1976. And I think you entered Bethel after that. Am I correct?
I came to Bethel in 82.
Okay. There's three brothers that there at Bethel had something very, very odd, very, very tremendous in common. No doubt you know what it is. Three brothers I'm referring to are Gene Smalley, who worked in the writing department. He was in charge of questions from the readers, and he was also like the writing department expert in ideology and doctrine. He could supposedly, defend it tooth and nail, Watchtower doctrine. So you had Gene Smalley, many years in Bethel. You had Cyril Latino, a tremendous fella, very talented, and you had, of course, Dan Sidlick, who finally made it onto the governing body after many, many years. He was punished by Knorr and stuck in the factory, and then they forgave him and brought him back, and so on. I had many conversations with Dan Sidlick long before he was ever appointed to the governing body. But all three of these brothers did something in common, and you know what it was? After serving many years at Bethel, they finally got married, and I have to tip my hat to them. They took advantage of their position at Bethel, teachers and public speakers and so on, and they just waited and watched for one new class after another of Gilead to come through. And they watched and observed who is the most beautiful, prettiest girl in the new Gilead class, and that's who they married. Gene Smalley married a certain girl from Scandinavian country, very beautiful girl. He was much older, and she was going through to become a missionary. Alessino did the same thing, and Dan Sidlick married someone that came through. Her name was Marina, and they tremendous age difference there, but at any rate, and he was a housekeeper there at Bethel, had the personality of a pit viper. And everyone in Bethel was, knew about her and so on, but she was well protected with her husband Dan. Do you recall these three wives of these three brothers?
Well, I knew Smalley and in the department well, and Olacino, I work with him every day, and Sidlick's were personal friends of ours. I can tell you stories that are you would find them unbelievable. Some of the stories that I can tell you. We discussed child abuse in the car with Sidlick's and going out to visit to Long Island at a certain point. The Guggenheim Estate out there, that a witness was a curator of a museum, and we were taking Sidlick's out there. We talked about child abuse there. We talked about it over dinner, and Sidlick and Marina, what a story about them. They were really earthy. Marina was English, and so she didn't hesitate to curse like a sailor. I'm not saying all English people, but they sort of freer with that language. The women are, I have observed, not all of them. I got to get myself out of this. I got myself into trouble here. But Marina, she was a tough broad. She was very pretty, and she worshipped the ground Dan walked on. But she also told him off, and I've been in their company when she told him off, and that was this. It was amusing to watch. Same with Orsino. These women were tough. Smalley married a woman from Germany, and there's some people that I know who were in Bethel who know them, who knew Smalley's wife pretty well from Germany. Did you mention a fourth person? The original person, I got Smalley, Orsino, and Sidlick. Was there anybody else?
Yeah, I guess we know that Sidlick and Alcino have both died. Is that correct?
Yes. Oh, yes. Sidlick died quite a while ago. Alcino died just a few months ago.
But Gene Smalley is he still alive and working at Bethel in the street department or what?
Yeah, he's still alive, and he's wanders, from my informant, he wanders around Warwick, and he looks after, even back then he was over the, well, he was a senior writer, but he looked after the library, and I think there's something that he still does with that area, but that's about all from what my informant said. I think he's about 84. Smalley.
Two others that I'm dying to know about. The very famous brother Harley Miller. He was chief overseer of the service.
Harley Miller I knew too very, very well. Harley Miller was our table head when we first went to Bethel. And Brooks was their long gone.
Military, I think in the Army. But my question is, I'm dying to know whatever happened to Harley Miller.
Well, he died, but Harley Miller was in service, and I had a discussion with him. I called him up one time over something that was in the Awake magazine because I found out that he wrote it, and it was so out there, so ridiculous, and put a lot of pressure on a lot of witnesses who were involved in alternative therapy. Around the world, Jehovah's Witnesses have always been interested in, it seems to me, in other types of healing than the regular allopathic medicine. And they put out an article, and it was Harley Miller who was the one who basically was behind it. And I had heard from a number of people who were lost their jobs, lost their businesses because they practiced alternative therapy. Well, they had the right to practice anything they want to practice if it's legal. And he apologized to me. He absolutely apologized. He said, I didn't know. What happens is sometimes you get the ear of these people in the writing department, and it's all one-sided, and then you get trouble. And that's what happened over the years, and you get the letters in. You couldn't please everybody, so just stay out of these kind of things, you know. When I asked Harry Polian one time about abortion, why didn't they say, I said this a little while ago on this program, and I said, how come you don't say that certain birth control things cause an abortion? He said, well, he said the sisters have a hard enough time being in this organization. He said, we don't want to add any more problems to their lives. So see, even they recognize the way that the organization got into people's private lives by the things they would say, and especially the awake.
Yeah, you have tremendous knowledge. I'm very impressed. Speaking of Harley Miller, whatever happened to a fellow I call Mr. Jehovah's Witness himself? There never was another man who ever lived who was like a perfect Jehovah's Witness, like the great Malcolm Allen in the service department in charge of Pennsylvania. Whatever happened to Malcolm Allen?
I have a picture of myself with Malcolm and his wife out west. I had to go out west. I left Bethel in 92, and in 92, and in 93, 94, I signed a contract with a company called Knowledge Adventure to write a child's program for the internet. And anyway, I had to go out to California to the company to work with some of their artists to pick out artwork for the program. And I saw Malcolm. I'm wondering.
Barbara.
What?
Barbara, did you say that Cyril Alcino died?
Yeah, he died about a month or two ago. I know it seemed like a few weeks ago, but I do know that
he had a great impact on me. I didn't personally see him speak, but I ran into Special Pioneers in Eastern Kentucky, and they had talks by Cyril Alcino. I believe he spoke at the Columbus conventions in Ohio, and I've got 3 or 4 of these tapes of him. And he basically, this is in the early 90s when Watchtower had a chance to change the course, and he showed that the whole elder arrangement was pretty much based on the Pharisees. They were epic thoughts, but I started making copies, sending them around just like they were. And then suddenly the Kenan Ministry says, no one does the spiritual food with the governing body. Anybody who does stuff like this, they need to cease to desist now, or they will be disfellowshipped. So I stopped doing it, But the man was right on point, 150%. And there's no doubt about it. We've got a modern-day pharisaical organization. That's what Watchtower is. They have to have all kinds of specious rules to control people.
that's right.
I don't even know what the guy looks like. All I know is he did a fantastic expose. I couldn't believe Watchtower even allowed it. But they had an opportunity to come to their senses in the early 90s, and they didn't. It just got worse from there on.
Well,
that's all I have to say.
Once they stopped publishing so much literature, they didn't need the writers. I mean, it's just obvious. So that they have very few people writing anymore. They don't need it. They don't put anything out anymore.
Well, I just told maybe I should put the tape if they're wrong.
I mean, they put out tons and tons and tons of stuff all those years. They were the second largest publishing house after Reader's Digest in the 80s. That was, Watchtower was the second largest publishing house in the world. So they had to have the writers and ideas and everything. But all of that is gone. And so Alcino was a very, very, very interesting person. And he knew where all the skeletons in Bethel were. You ask him any question, he had the answers about anybody. If there was an alcoholic running around Bethel, he knew who he was. And it would be...
well, aren't all the best speakers alcoholics?
Well, a lot of drinking went on at Bethel, that's for sure. We knew that. Monday morning, the garbage were full of bottles of empty bottles of liquor.
But did you? So did both Harvey Miller and Malcolm Allen? Did they both die faithful at Bethel? Is that right?
Malcolm Allen, his wife, left Bethel to take care of her aunt, and I think they went to Texas. And but there was much more to the story. When I saw them and had lunch with them, they were happy. We went to Bethel I think like the year that they were leaving, and Joe knew him from when Joe was in Bethel in the 50s. So they Gracie was very outspoken, and some of the women told me about Gracie, and so she had an opinion on everything. And Malcolm was kind of in the background, sort of with the gossip and stuff like that. Well, that's not unusual, but they left. They were weak witnesses. They inherited a house. The aunt died, and they inherited the house. They were not ever strong leaders in the organization after they left Bethel. And he alluded to me during lunch that they were not ever going to be like they were before, and but they're long deceased. Years are just passing by so quickly, and they're all dying off. And that's the problem with this old governing body member. They're not healthy men. They're not healthy mentally nor physically at their age. And I ought to know, because I'm in that age bracket, and so is my husband. So we know the vicissitudes of old age. And so the new people that they're bringing in are men who are going to take over from Stephen Lett and people like him and Hurd. And so what does that mean when you're making leaders, governing body members out of big-time businessmen? So you can only imagine what 10 years is going to do to this organization and its so-called spirituality. So,
wow. And Barbara, over in the Bethel home office, there were two prominent brothers that ran the place under George Couch, which I think George Couch died a faithful witness at Bethel, but there are two others in the office here. I wanted to ask whatever happened to them. They're both of them. Their last name was Lang, Lang, and in fact, in Watchtower administration and Watchtower high management positions, it was very much dominated by people of German ethnicity. It seemed like N.H. Knorr and some of the other ones just loved to put Germans in charge of things over there. So we had one brother there whose name was Wally Lang in the Bethel office, and there was another Lang over there too, but I forgot his first name. So there were two Langs. Do you recall who they are? Whatever happened to Wally Lang?
He wasn't there when we were there. I don't recall that name at all. Now, I have an old telephone book. If he's in that, it's 92 telephone book. And if he's in there, he was at Bethel. But I don't recall him at all in the office. George Couch, and we knew George Couch pretty well. You know, George Couch was a independently wealthy man. He was more like a volunteer, and he did not. We thought he was the home overseer because that's the way it came across to everybody. But really, the man who was the head of this, let's see, the committee, a home committee. And the man who was the head of the home committee was Robert Wallen. He was and he was also Jarris's secretary. So
Bob Wallen, he was up in the president's office.
That's right. And he was when we were there. He was the with Jairus. When he's the secretary, that doesn't mean he was taking notes. He was a voice of Jairus, and we knew Bob rather well. He was the he was the table head of our son's table when our son went to Bethel in '81. And Joe remembered Bob on from the 50s. So they weren't, a lot of those people who were running the place weren't strangers to Joe, because these are guys who just stayed there and married, and they brought these women in, and many of those women were messes. They were absolute messes. They were psychologically disturbed because of the things that they saw and coming into Bethel, and years and years. I mean, Brooke. I was going to say the one. Anyway, drinking. The closet drinkers. Some of the older people that we met while we were there. When you got to be friends of theirs, and then they would start talking about the past and about some of the things that went on. It's just humans. Humans are always trouble. We're a mess, and it's an institution. You can't take people and institutionalize them and run their lives with all these policies and practices and rules and expect them to all be happy at Bethel. It wasn't that way. And to me, it was amazing. It operated as well as it did because of the vicissitudes of humans. This one would run away with somebody else's wife, and that one with somebody else's husband. I mean, it didn't happen every day, but it did happen. But you had 2,000 people in Brooklyn when we were there. So it was interesting. I thought it was fascinating, and I thought it got a lot. It operated pretty well considering all those people, but they had strict control. George Couch he talked to us a number of times on different occasions about the people at Bethel. He's the one who, I said it recently, he's the one who told us that they were bringing in young men who always checked the boxes when they filled out the paperwork, when they come into Bethel and asked, have you ever been on drugs? And he said every young man that was coming in said yes. So
yeah, I believe it. Hey, if you'll just indulge me in one final one, I wanted to ask about the great John Curzon. I know you answered the question before, but I want to find out more about it. You said something about he died a very, very good man. What I want to know is, did he die in the truth, or did he fall away, or what happened to John Curzon? He was nobody's fool, very, very intelligent, smart man, engineer, and so on. John Curzon, of course, he had a brother, Russ Curzon, that wasn't quite as good as him.
We knew Russell Curzon. John was already out when we went in, and one time we saw John walking on Columbia Heights, and Joe recognized him from the 50s because Joe was in the press room for 3 years in the 50s. So John Curzon invented a lot of specialized machinery for the use of the Watchtower. He invented that machine that years and years ago, when we got our Awaken Watchtower in the mail, it had wrapping on it, a brown wrapping. Well, he invented the machine for that. I'll never forget that because Joe told me so. And when we met John Curzon on the street walking one day, we got to talking, and we were visiting. Yeah, that was the thing when we were visiting, and that's when he asked about, or we mentioned, I don't know, Joe mentioned that we had a son, and John said to us how fortunate we were that we had a child. He said, I wish I had done that. I wish so much that I had married and had a child. And he said, you should be very happy. I walked away from him feeling very sad, but Russell always had a smile on his face. And it was fun to go to Russell's office because he kept a lot of stuff in his office. When the old people died at Bethel, they had stuff that belonged to Russell. And so Pastor Russell. And so Russell Curzon, he would take that stuff and he'd have it hanging in his office all over the place. He was quite entertaining, but he didn't appreciate the infirmary. He had his own specialist doctors because he could afford it outside of Bethel.
Yeah.
Everybody had a story to tell. I'll tell you, I found it fascinating.
Hey, Barbara, I think we're going to have to probably wrap it up there. We're going to get on with the news, but I want to thank Larry for calling in. I know there's a lot of questions, but yeah, in fact, where'd Joe go? But you let him know we appreciated him coming on. But
Yeah, Barbara, he got tired. He's almost 90 years old. He's 3 months short of 90 years old. I married an older man. He was 6 and I was 3 when we got married. And so this is my story. And anyway, it was a lot of fun dating an older man back then, but today it's a drag. He is actually, we're 5 years difference. And so, age, the years take its toll. And so it's taking its toll on him. I was delighted that he was willing to be here this evening, and he still works in the yard. And but he's beginning to forget. He forgets things more than most husbands do. And but we're doing fine, and we have been married 65 years.
Well, congratulations. Now, you let them know that we really did appreciate it. I got a lot of people emailing me and saying, wow, it's so good to see Joe on. So let them know we really did. It's really nice, Barbara.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. I really mean that. That was really good. Well, thank you, Barbara, for coming on tonight. And we'll see you in a couple of weeks. Now, you just keep standing tall. You didn't get hit by that hurricane down there, did you?
No. We're southern Tennessee. We are south central Tennessee. It was northeastern Tennessee that had the damage.
Yes.
We got a little bit of wind, that's all. We're like an hour above Huntsville, Alabama.
Well, we're glad you're doing good. And Barbara, we love you. We want you to keep standing tall, and don't you ever give in, up, or out, and keep exposing the stuff. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Rick, for what you're doing. So many appreciate the efforts you're making, and your wife also. And it's nice to hear her voice and that she's well now, considering she was so sick.
Thank you, Barbara. She'll appreciate that. All right. I'm looking at my picture there. It looks like Halloween. I don't know why it's coming that color, but
you look a little green.
I'm looking like a ghost on there. Well, thank you, Barbara. I appreciate it. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Barbara.
Take care. Bye, everybody.
Well, my goodness, that's Barbara Anderson. Wow, I'll tell you, it looks like a Halloween scene, right? I don't know what happened to my camera here, but it's not working right. It's not working right at all. Well, anyways, thank you for coming in. You're on the 6 Screens Tele-Network. We've got more programming coming up next. We have got JW World News. Now, that's the news the Watchtower doesn't want us talking about, but we're going to talk about it tonight. And so don't go anywhere. By all means, stay with us. We've got a lot to talk about, as we usually do every Saturday night. So we're going to end this broadcast, and I'll see you over on JW World News. I don't know what's going on with the coloring here. It looks like a Halloween set, right? But I didn't do anything different. But hang in with us. We'll be right back stay on our YouTube channel, our Facebook channels, and we'll be right back with JW World News. Thank you for dialing in, and all the people that called in and talked to Barbara. Thank you for doing that too. So we'll end this stream right now.